Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis Donia Kawash.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Donia Kawash, Director General of Leaders for Peace and also head of, or president rather, of a proud Tunisian women. It is in a chaotic international context that we are meeting today, one that reminds us of the importance of women's situation. And we're thinking here about Iranian women whose courage we applaud, Afghan women, and other countries where the right of women is jeopardized, such as challenging the right to abortion in the United States, and the case of Sweden that introduced feminist diplomacy with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Margot Wallström, who today decided to abandon feminist diplomacy because, as you all are aware of, there was a change in government. What does that mean? Just like peace, women's rights are threatened. Nothing can be taken for granted. And it also means that feminist diplomacy is an issue of equality, but also of democracy, which is why it is of concern to us all. Women can no longer be considered as victims alone. They must be associated with decision-making and associated with the future of our world, because diplomacy is synonymous with public service, servicing men and women in all areas of activity. Two good news. The case for women is progressing, and today we have 5 exceptional speakers to speak about this topic. Exceptional women because they've all been change makers in their own way to further the case for the issues for women. Ms. Zourabishvili, President of Georgia, Spanish Minister of Foreign Affairs for International Cooperation, Ms. Isabelle Rom, Minister for Equality Between Women and Men, Diversity and Equal Opportunities of France, Gabriela Ramos, Director for Social and Human Sciences of UNESCO, and Fatma Masri, Director of Supporting Arab Women at the Table and Director of Women, Peace and Security of the Arab Reform Initiative. Welcome.
Salomé Zourabishvili,
your experience speaks perfectly to feminist diplomacy. Born in France from Georgian parents, you were France's ambassador to Georgia, Minister of Foreign Affairs of your country, during which you profoundly overhauled your ministry. And you were also elected President of the Republic, first head of state, woman head of state in the Caucasian. And you also integrated or ensured that Georgia's first steps could be taken towards EU and NATO. And you said you would never, as a small country, always need to be smarter than your neighbor and not cede to provocations. As a woman head of state in a world with only 29 women head of state in 195 member states of the UN, what more should we do than others? Well, not to give in to provocations, indeed, and not give in to polarization. One must try to deal with attacks on both the role of women in a significant position, and one must not necessarily be a feminist. Feminism means that you hold office as any other person would do so, without trying to use the very fact that you're a woman as being a different weapon. I think that today women demonstrate in this very complicated, conflict-ridden world how we can exist and progress. You've paid some tribute to different women here. I'd like to pay tribute to Iranian women. And they're our neighbors. And these Iranian women, during history, had a good deal of close ties with France during a number of centuries ago. We feel very close to such Iranian women, and therefore I'd like to express also my solidarity with them. Let us not also forget Ukrainian women today. Why? Well, because they've shown the extent to which they are part and parcel of this Ukrainian resistance. As troops, part of the troops, Ukrainian soldiers, that are also founding the linchpin of Ukraine's resistance. They are supporting their spouses, husbands, and taking part in this war effort. And in fact, we are seeing Ukraine starting to succeed, and thanks to the participation. Moldova were prime minister and are not fighting at the front, but fighting extremely difficult circumstances. They are being imposed, or Russia rather is imposing upon them a energy blockage, and also they're experiencing external pressures because of oligarchs associated with Moscow. And Ursula von der Leyen just arrived in Moldova to support them and to announce what I fully support, which is a European Union solidarity and support to weather this winter season, which will mean a financial support, and that's excellent news. On behalf of these women, I'd like to also have a few words for Georgian women living in regions occupied since 2008 by Russia. Such women are also showcasing their resilience, and they give us hope for the future, for the integrity of this territory. I would also like to speak about something which is less common, which is Russian women not associated in any fashion whatsoever to Russian decision-making. When we look at the media, there's only stern-looking Russian men. And I'm thinking here about Russian women who need to bear the brunt of their husbands and sons being mobilized to a front they do not know, in a territory they are not familiar with, whether it was in Georgia or now in Ukraine. It is high time for Russia to learn that the land of others is not Russia's land, and that Mother Russia could finally Russian mothers could reunite with their children at last. Thank you, President.
José Manuel
Alvarez, you are used to being surrounded by women because your government is mainly made up of women, 64%, 3 vice presidents, a few ministers. So your country is a champion in feminist diplomacy. You've adopted a maternity and paternity leave and a strong law on consent. You have other feminist measures taken within your government, and I've read about you, and you are personally very committed to gender equality. Could you please tell us how you implement gender mainstreaming in your public policy and foreign policy in a world of rising populism? Yes, indeed, previous governments said, or like to say, that they had a feminist government in which there are more women than men. But this is an everyday battle, which is why Spain became, in 2020, just like France and other countries, a member of a network, a small network, but still very much active. And we hope a greater number of countries will join this network. It is a network of countries with a feminist foreign policy. Why should we have such a policy? Well, because today it seems extremely challenging to further those causes that are most urgent for humanity, to weather and find solutions to humanitarian crises and ensure women's participation around the world, to ensure women's participation in economic development, because in many countries women can take care of raising children and small and older children, and we need to ensure women are part and parcel of the development of these countries. Also, President of Georgia gave us some very clear examples that are front in mind. Women are hit harder than others, whether it is in times of war. They are, with children, the very first victims of conflicts. whether it is climate change that impacts heavily a country, women will be bearing the brunt. So it is extremely complicated for us to develop a development policy or foreign policy or peace and stability policy without the participation of women, which is why we have a feminist diplomacy at the first level, national level, with developments in recent years in Spain, and ultimately what we do with foreign policy is a perfect translation of what we do and the measures we take domestically, because we believe in gender equality in Spain. We believe in equality in general, full stop, around the world. Gender equality and equality is the same. There's not one type of equality for men and women and another type of equality for other groups around the world. Second, and this is a very strong point I want to stress, we give a great deal of importance to a feminist development policy to help with development aid. 20% of our budget for humanitarian aid is geared towards helping women to achieve equality. We are about to adopt a new Development Cooperation Act in Spain. It should be done by year's end. And we're also stressing equality between men and women around the world. This is already a priority for us. It will be enshrined in our framework legislation. And then there's the way we experience our own diplomacy. This is the very first year in Spain's history that a group of diplomats has had more women than men. Last year there was gender equality amongst diplomats for a very simple reason. Why would Spain prevent itself from using half of its human resources in diplomacy? So we're increasing the number of women ambassadors. We have made efforts to double that number in the past 4 years. Thank you, Minister.
La diplomatie féministe au cœur de l'action publique,
at the heart of public policy. Well, more on that later, Ms. Isabelle Rome. You were the youngest magistrate in France, one of the key figures of the major event to fight violence against women, and you're fighting for gender equality. The fight against violence against women has been at the heart of your professional life. What schemes would you like to implement to fight this scourge and to fight this mindset allowing for violence? Thank you. Thank you for organizing this roundtable in French. Indeed, this fight against violence against women is the very first key pillar of the priorities set out by Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic, violence against women. And many measures have been implemented in the previous governmental term as part of what we call the Grenelle. So it's a key event on domestic violence, which brought together different ministries, associations, different professionals, doctors, lawyers, social workers across France. And it gave way to the development of 4 laws and some 50 measures, prevention measures, protection measures, and also preventing repeat violence against women. Often I like to say that there's only efficient protection of victims if we can prevent efficiently repeat offenders and if we can support those who work with who are violent to prevent them. Dr. Mukwege says that before becoming a member of a certain gender, you're a member of humanity. When we speak about women, we speak about the entire humanity in in essence, one is speaking here about 52% of world population. And I do thank you for asking us what measures we'd like to take. We're considering various actions. Thank you for this question. We'll try to tap into the Spanish example, especially for specialized justice, because a parliamentary mission is underway on this topic. We will better support also women who are falling victim to violence, to be able to escape their violent men, helping them so on the social aspect, housing, children, or childcare, professional and psychological support as well. And you said so quite rightly. If we want to significantly reduce the violence against women, we must work on awareness raising. We must also change the way for centuries on end. Men have been represented as being superior to women. This is why, together with the Ministry of National Education, PAP and DI, we've decided, and it is the minister himself who will steer this new measure, but we've decided together to implement a law which has not been implemented in France until now, of 2001, to provide for sexual education throughout the education system. Sexual education means education to gender equality, respecting the other, and preventing violent and sexist. Those are the measures we'd like to take in France in the coming months. Changing paradigms to changing mindsets, to change mindsets rather. This is your life battle, Miss Gabrielle Ramos. You also fought the discrimination and inequality. You spearheaded the World Forum on Racism, and were also you worked on creating an instrument to ensure ethics in artificial intelligence. Digital aspects are everywhere. How can we fight those stereotypes that are part and parcel of new technologies? And I'd like to also remind ourselves that 85% of technological development, are created by white men. Thank you very much for all this information. It is a pleasure to be here with these three leading countries in gender equality, and thank you for organizing this roundtable. I would also just like to join hands in saying that women's rights are jeopardized worldwide, even within the public service. We saw that an Afghan woman couldn't stay in the public service because she took part in sports activities. This is unbelievable. So, when it comes to the digital world, indeed, we can build an inclusive digital world that leads to greater solidarity, greater justice. But the way we go about this is not always a very done in a very equal fashion. When it comes to our approach, we oftentimes replicate bias, discrimination, inequality, and this is what happens in the digital world as well. And as you said quite rightly, 85% of AI development were done by countries of the North. So there's a loss of diversity in the development of these technologies. Only 5 countries develop AI technologies. Women are underrepresented in the source of development. So when we create instruments for development or funding, of course there will be discrimination against women. So we need to think about the quality and representativeness of women in these endeavors. And there are also biases and stereotypes that are being perpetrated. when we look for technical assistance and we look at who developed technical assistance, Siri and others, we hear in these technical developments again men's voices and not women's voices. And so now I'm very proud to tell you that this instrument was the only international instrument adopted by 193 countries which deal with women's issues. And so, of course, if only 20% of girls are take part in digital developments and digital themes, there will be a shortage of women's representation in the digital and technology. So we need greater participation of young girls and women in these areas. Madam Minister, as you said, it's not very easy. We need to have the right instruments to be able to level the playing field. So, as a government, what do we need? We need to invest in digital businesses led by women. We need more women in information technology. And we need to bring about changes in the mindset. So, at UNESCO, there's a wonderful project that I really adore. It is called Changing Mentalities. So it's true enough, mindset is found everywhere. Some men rather, are good at supporting this change in mindset, and others don't, and even some women like status quo. And so it is important that we can raise awareness about what happens when we use technology. And then there are 193 countries that will need to implement these new projects. And so I'd like to help us, all three countries present here and other countries, in this project. Thank you, Ms. Ramos. This is a call for action at the end of this roundtable. Ms. Nasri, you're Lebanese, director of the South Project kept by the Paris Peace Forum Scale-Up Committee. Congratulations. You lead the Women, Peace and Security Initiative within the Arab Reform Initiative of the MENA region. This project, funded today by the European Union, works in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Palestine, countries at war. And in these countries, you support women at the negotiation table that are working to build peace and take part in public life. How and why would you present to women who are not always in the know-how, how can you introduce feminist methodology in public service? Thank you. So, as you rightly point out, I think that in all countries in the Middle East and in North Africa, the MENA region, women have truly been at the forefront of the rising of people in these countries that have conquered their country. They've fought patriarchal society and its standards, social, legal standards that are discriminatory. They fought domestic violence and harassment, their right to take part in society, whether it is in parliament or negotiation tables. And despite all of this, despite all these tremendous challenges they are experiencing, I think that today you hear about intersectionality and convergence of crises, or fights rather. We work with these women and we express the importance of having an intersectional outlook. We ensure that we can give a voice to women who truly manage to lessen discrimination. We try to leverage positive role models and to institutionalize local mentorship.
On n'appelle pas vraiment ça capacity building.
We're not talking here about capacity building because the idea is not just to give women skills or new knowledge acquisition. The idea is to facilitate local, regional, or transnational networks. This is where women can make a real difference. And we also want to invest in giving a woman a voice to to those that are not usually a usual suspect in international fora, whether those are international or local fora. We truly need to identify new women candidates who could represent their communities.
And when I say community-based efforts, really I mean the change makers that are never talked about. For instance, women who in Syria and Yemen stood up for prisoners' rights, or in Iraq during the parliamentary elections, 90 women stood for elections, of which 53 were actually elected. So these women are here, and it's about giving them the right platforms. Thank you, Fatme. A message heard loud and clear. It's important to scale this. I think we can give her a round of applause.
Monsieur le Ministre,
Minister, how can a feminist policy be scaled in 2023? Your country will take the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU. How can a feminist diplomacy be scaled at the European level? Well, we're not looking to be leaders at the global level. We want all other countries to get to our level, and that's what we're going to try and achieve during our presidency. Now, our presidency will be an important time for feminist foreign policy networks. We're going to organize a major event where we'll explain what it all entails. And we'll explain why a feminist foreign policy is not an alternative foreign policy, but is really at the heart of what a foreign policy should be, based on peace, security, and the fight against climate change, like I was saying when I first took the floor, because we cannot leave half of the world population behind. And then there will be different levels. There'll be the European level, where we will try to advance gender equality in terms of the gender pay gap, try to achieve more transparency and better systems to give equal opportunities in terms of pay. And the same goes for paternity leave and maternity leave. How can we do better in terms of that family-based policy? All of that was absolutely essential in Spain. And based on our own experience, also make progress in the fight against violence against women. Then there is another level. Europe is the bearer of a number of values and is very much listened to in the world. The world is extremely complex. It probably has not been this complex since the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we need to come back to the values of tolerance, pluralism, and democracy. And we need those values to be heard. And there again, feminist foreign policy is important in order to re-establish dialogue with others. And there, the UN has an essential solution in the realm of war, conflicts, and security. It's an essential initiative. We've seen it in Ukraine, we saw it in Afghanistan. We've seen how women tend to be on the front lines. So there is the workplace, then there's the issue of violence against women, and then at the international level, the voice of Europe really needs to be heard, and it is essential given the state of the world and the state of women as part of these conflicts. Thank you. Now, moving on to another European-level issue, that of cybersecurity, which is a threat to peace, and very often women need to be part of the solution, but only account for 11% of players in the cybersecurity sector. How can we change paradigms, Gabriela Ramos, and come up with a new approach for cybersecurity? Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I think we have the tools, and I don't think they're any different to the tools we're using in other sectors. The same tools go for cybersecurity. It's true that cybersecurity is thought of as a men's job. If you look even at women who are pursuing engineering, they do not see cybersecurity as the realm of women, and I think we need to change that. We need to include women's perspectives in this field. It's important because this is a global issue. It very much affects us. Cybersecurity attacks have increased to an astounding extent, and the solutions need not necessarily come only from technology. What's important is a human approach, and it's important to hear the voices of women who may have different solutions. Studies have shown, and these studies were conducted in the realm of finance, and we saw that back in the 2008 crisis, there was this phenomenon of groupthink. That is to say, we knew that there were problems, we knew that there was an imbalance in the market, but nobody raised their voice because of this groupthink phenomenon. And so studies have also shown that when you have a group of people that is composed only of men, if you add a woman to the mix, the dynamic changes. It brings more openness to the discussion in general. I'm not saying women are any better. I want to be clear, but it's not that. I'm saying that it's about diversity and openness, which gives us different perspectives. And when you think of cybersecurity, very often you're thinking in national terms, defense, finance, and so on. But online cyberbullying is massive. Plan International conducted a study that said that 58% of respondents, so girls, were attacked in the digital sphere, and that is something we also need to be able to tackle. Thank you, Gabriela Ramos.
Salomé Zourabichvili, vous avez
Salomé Zourabichvili, you mentioned the important role that Ukrainian women have played. In your foreign policy, how are you able to involve women at the negotiating table within leadership positions so that they may anticipate conflicts and violence? Well, I think that is a universal issue. Whether women will truly be given a seat at the negotiation table following a war that is waged in great part by men. When it comes to negotiation, where are the women and to what extent will their voices be heard? Now, I personally negotiated 15 years ago with the present Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs on the Russian military bases in Georgia. And at that time, it worked for a small amount of time because Russia returned to occupy the territory a few years later. But at the time, it may have worked because I am a woman and perhaps my approach to negotiation was slightly different. What I do hope is that when we begin negotiating following this tragic war, in Ukraine. And after Ukraine's successive wins will force the Russians to sit at the negotiating table and give up on the territories that it is currently occupying. I do hope that when all the countries that neighbor Russia begin negotiations and who need the 19th and 20th centuries to truly come to an end and who wish to live in a stable 21st century where men respect women, where powerful countries respect smaller countries, where a border is respected. And for such a negotiation, it is key that women be involved. Thank you very much. To underline that, what you shared about your personal experience was very interesting too. And the numbers show that when women are at the negotiation table, peace is more likely. But we don't really see that in practice. Isabelle Rome, President Macron has made gender equality a priority. However, funding for it remains modest as compared to the budgets of other ministries. How do you plan to implement these grand goals? Yes, indeed.
Permettez-moi de dire que le budget est modeste.
You know, it's a bit of a shortcut to say that the budget is limited. The budget for my ministry is relatively limited, even though I was able to get a 15% increase. But this Ministry for Gender Equality reports to the Prime Minister and is intended as an interministerial entity that plans to mainstream this policy across ministries. 2 billion to 2.5 billion euros, are involved if you were to add up the budgets that different ministries allocate to this issue. The Prime Minister, in early 2023, will set up an interministerial committee for gender equality that I will lead with all of the various ministers. And then a gender equality plan will be set out for the 4 years to come based on domestic violence, the gender pay gap, health, and the promotion of a culture of equality. So as you see, it is really a very wide-spanning initiative that has been made a priority for this presidential term.
Simplement, je reprends aussi ce que vous avez dit en parlant des femmes à la table des négociations.
And coming back to what you were saying about women at the negotiation table, I think that it's important to include women in different types of governance structures within companies. For instance, at the European level, we have a directive called Women on Boards. In France, for 10 years now, we've had a law in force that requires the boards of the largest companies to have 40% of their members be women. And the fact of having a woman or more women on boards has actually changed corporate governance. And to come back to what you were saying too, that diversity is a driver of performance as well as it is a driver of peace in the world. So indeed, let us not deny ourselves the benefits of harnessing the contribution of 52% of humanity. We are going through all kinds of crises and conflicts, and at this time it's important to hear the voice of women who are in power, but also all of the women who are not heard. I think we can be their voice, amplify their voices. Women in Afghanistan, for instance, sometimes we feel powerless and we think, well, if only they could hear us and know that they are in our minds and hearts. Thank you very much, Isabelle Rome.
Merci Isabelle Rome. Vous envisagez le féminisme comme un humanisme.
So for you, feminism is humanism, and I understand why. And let's come back to these invisible heroines. And I'd like to come back to Fatma Masri. These are women change makers that we never hear about very often because they don't have the tools and platforms that make them visible to the international community. How do you support them and ensure that they have access to networks and that they can get access to funding?
Je pense on a tous parlé de nouvelles voix.
I think we all talked about the types of platforms on which these women can express themselves. The international community also is lacking to some extent. We talk about human security, but we rarely invite women or never invite these women to be a part of panel discussions or in forums where these decisions are actually made. It's always armed men who are invited to the negotiation table. And so it is our duty to find these voices, to give them a platform and a space to engage in dialogue. As women and girls, how are they affected by these wars? And the issues that are of concern to them, at least in the Middle East. We know this. We no longer need to think about it and analyze it. Now the time has come to take action. And I think that falls to all of us. To take action and to really get very granular to ensure that we have the budget, the resources to help all of these unheard voices and achieve sustainable peace. Thank you very much, Fatma Masri, for being that voice. I hope that these women will be among us next year. Now we're nearing the end of our panel. We're going to take a few questions before we conclude. Sarah,
la première question est pour vous.
For the first question.
Thank you very much to the panel. As many of you have highlighted, the increasing focus on feminist diplomacy really is reflective of the integrated and extreme challenges facing the world today, whether that's the food systems crisis, conflict, or indeed the climate crisis, requiring integrated and transformative solutions. We also know that feminist diplomacy reminds us of the importance of focusing our resources, focusing our efforts to address gender equality, as many of you did here in Paris just 1 year ago at the Generation Equality Forum. And at the Generation Equality Forum, many governments made commitments to advance a feminist foreign policy. And many civil society actors made commitments to support those efforts, such as the very effective Global Partner Network on Feminist Foreign Policy. We've heard you say today that feminist foreign policy should be explicitly ambitious. It should aim to transform the lives of women and girls and go to the heart of power dynamics. It should aim to embrace feminist principles of collective accountability, of inclusion. And so my question is, what strategies would you recommend to incorporate the voices of all women and girls in the advancement of feminist foreign policy? How can we put those voices at the center of feminist diplomacy? Thank you very much.
Qui souhaite répondre?
Who would like to answer that?
Je peux dire maybe very, very fast, because I think that we have here some of the examples. When the government of Spain came out and said half and half, when the government of Mexico came and said half and half, it's great because it takes leadership to have half and half, but I said that we need to embed it in the law. And it was great somebody here reminded me that I worked with the Mexican Congress to establish the quota, 50-50. Of course, it was no without hesitancy of many people. At the end, the Congress was not less productive. Some people said it's going to be less productive. No, we're going to be full of incompetent women, which was not the case. But now we have, by law, half and half in the regional governments and in the national government. And I think this needs to be done. Quotas, of course, are always uncomfortable, but they work.
Thank you, Gabriela Ramos. Isabel Rome, I think you would like to add something.
Juste pour parler du forum
I just wanted to talk about the Generation Equality Forum and France's involvement in the forum. 100 million euros were earmarked to promote sexual and reproductive rights, which are at the heart of women's fundamental rights. France continues to be active on this front. It's absolutely essential. And I think one of the important issues for feminist diplomacy in France is participation through European institutions, and we too impatiently await the Spanish presidency of the Council so that we may proactively accelerate the directive on pay transparency, but also the directive on violence against women. And I'd like to add, and I think we're perfectly aligned on that, Catherine Colonna, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I, to support the implementation of the Istanbul Convention. We wish for the convention to be ratified by a growing number of states. The convention recognizes that there is structural violence against women, and it requires states to be involved in education, protection, and sanctions against the authors and perpetrators of this violence. Thank you very much. José Manuel Alvarez. Yes, I would like to say that there are three levels, actually. First of all, there's the legal framework that needs to be established. Women need to have rights, and that needs to be enshrined in the law, that gender equality. A framework needs to exist in terms of violence against women as well. And then, and this is more related to foreign policy, development cooperation. You need to give women the financial means for empowerment. Microcredit, for instance. We know that women have a much higher rate of repayment than men. 1% of our development cooperation needs to go towards players who are very active in that field. And perhaps this is because I'm the only man here, we need also to work with men. We shouldn't think that we're working only for women, and we shouldn't pit women against men. Everyone needs to be involved in this struggle. At the end of the day, 50% of the world is made of women, and the rest of us, we are their children. Thank you very much. Thank you, José Manuel Alvarez. We will conclude on that call to action. Thank you for calling on all of us to do more and for reminding us what is at stake for humanity. We'll see you next year with Corazza, Justin Vales, and Fabienne Ara, who have committed to feminist diplomacy. We will look at the numbers and the progress we have made. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. I remind you to take all your belongings with you. Mesdames, Messieurs, votre attention, s'il vous plaît. Nous vous invitons à récupérer toutes vos affaires et à quitter la salle. Merci.